USC is not ready for the Big Ten. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Badger fans? This is Ryan Herring's Locked On Badgers. Thank you for joining us. Live show. We're at the new pad in Wisconsin. I'm really excited for it. I'm in the basement, actually. I have to rebuild an office, so it is what it is. They put me in the basement. Justin, let's talk about it. USC is not ready for the Big Ten.
I agree with that. I don't think there's much question of that. There were a few teams that played Big Ten style football in the Pac-12, and Utah was one of them, who even when they didn't have a great quarterback situation, still was a problem for them. So the way I look at it is you're going to struggle mightily against a team when you don't really have, or against teams that play a lot of similar style to that. And they're going to have multiple teams this time, especially looking early. You're going to have Michigan against them, who definitely will have a good defense. I'm not concerned about that with Michigan. They're going to punch them in the mouth. They're going to be super physical with them, just because that's the culture that's been there. Now, whether that weans off over the next several years, we'll see. But I expect us to come in and be super physical with them and be aggressive. I don't know who else they'll have on their schedule overall, but I do not see them being able to withstand the consistency that they're going to see in the Big Ten. It's just a far more physical conference in general. Yep.
I agree. This was from Land Grant Holy Land, which is an Ohio State site. He said after revamping its defensive staff, USC's been on fire recruiting trail. Is that cause for concern for the rest of the conference? And again, not every media outlet is talking USC up, but I've seen enough of it where I'm like, all right, we got to stop here for a second. Lincoln Riley never has a good defense. And yes, he hired a up-and-coming defensive coordinator who had 1 year as the defensive coordinator. And by the way, in that 1 year, UCLA did not play Oregon, did not play Washington. I'm just saying, they were bad last year because they have no physicality and because their head coach hasn't given a crap about defense for a decade. Let's not pretend like that's instantly going to change.
You don't build that type of culture with your team overnight. That takes time. That takes years of. We didn't even see it last year when we had Brady Collins come in, who is an exceptionally tough-minded coach. And if we talk about anything, yeah, that was Cincinnati was known for physicality and aggressiveness. That did not translate totally in year one. It got better, and it got better as the season went along. The culture will build, but you have to get players in the right mindset, and you're probably going to have some guys that flush out because of it. Now, I will also say that recruiting class has kind of imploded a little bit. They've had some massive stars that they had on that group that just have jumped ship and gone to other places, which I don't think is a shock. I think right now, if you're going to USC as a high-level defensive recruit, until you see them prove it, I think you have to consider going somewhere else. You legitimately have to go to a place where you're going to be showcased in a cohesive, coherent unit. And I don't think that that's really what they have there right now. Even if they take a step, what's the urge? You can always wait a year or two and go there later on if you want to. But make them prove that the new staff has what it takes. Otherwise, you're putting yourself in a terrible spot. Look for perspective. Look how everyone looks at Tackett Curtis now, a year removed from being in high school. He went from being a top-level defensive recruit to people looking at him in a completely different light and saying, well, he's not the player that we thought he was. Is that the issue, or was there some other issues? I mean, obviously we know there's some injury things that happened, but there was also a absolutely horrible defensive setup that was at that school that put him, and he probably wasn't a guy who was totally ready to be on the field yet. I think he's an extremely high-level player, but it's asking a lot of anybody to come in as a redshirt freshman and start day one.
It is. Listen. This was an 8-5 team with Caleb Williams last year.
The number one pick in the draft.
Guys, Miller Moss might be really good. In fact, he probably will be. He's not Caleb Williams good. This is also a coach. I'm so sick of hearing no. Lincoln Riley cares about defense now. Listen, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, don't call it a dinosaur. It's a freaking duck. He doesn't care about defense. He hasn't his entire career. It's not suddenly going to change because he hires a new guy. Now, USC is still going to win games. They're still going to be good. They still have offensive skill. Lincoln Riley's still going to coach quarterbacks. but they have a stretch where they're going to play Michigan, then they're going to play Wisconsin, then they're going to go to Minnesota in October, then they're going to play Penn State. Rutgers is going to beat them up a little bit on the line of scrimmage. They're not physical enough.
Yeah.
Period.
Let me put it this way. The other aspect of this is simply when push comes to shove and you have adversity, people tend to regress back into their prior habits. So when that happens, he's likely going to go back to what he was as a coach previously. It's really difficult to change as a person. Anybody who's tried to change aspects of their life that they struggle with, it's an area that you have to be very self-aware and push yourself through. And I'm not sure that we haven't seen a ton of coaches that are capable of reinventing themselves at this level. It happens occasionally. Nick Saban kind of did it. He completely changed his view of offense partway through it because he realized he had to adapt or it wasn't going to work. Not everyone is capable of that level of change. And there's a reason why that guy was the greatest coach in college football history.
By the way, a couple comments in here about some buffering. I apologize. I'm still figuring out my setup. So I turned a knob a certain direction. Hopefully that helps. I don't know. I opened up the internet gates. We'll see. But yeah, I think Justin and I are in the same boat with this. Like, I don't think the USC fans are ready for how physical the Big Ten is. This feels like Nebraska twice over, right? You remember when Nebraska came into the conference and it was, the Big Red is here. Watch out. And then when Nebraska got Scott Frost had the legendary quote, we're going to make them adapt to us. We're Nebraska, blah, 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 blah. This feels like Nebraska coming in.
Maybe he would have been better running the triple or running the option offense again.
Yeah. I don't think they're ready. All right. Any last thoughts on USC, Justin?
Not a lot. I mean, listen, they're going to depend heavily on Moss. If he's just good this year, unless that defense takes a massive step, they're in trouble. And I think there could be a 6-6 season. Like I know people want to be high on them based on the talent level that's there. It doesn't matter how good your talent level is if the coaching stinks. And that's just, it is what it is when it comes to that. It's possible the defensive coordinator is a good hire, but it doesn't necessarily mean that change is going to happen overnight. And you have somebody who's a young coach. Like it could be a learning experience for him just taking this jump.
Yeah. Listen, Coach Lynn from UCLA, he's the defensive coordinator they hired. UCLA was really good last year defensively. That is a good hire. It's also not a home run. This is not Jim Leonard. This is not Dave Aranda when he went to LSU. Like, this is a guy with 1 year as a DC, and he's being hailed as like the savior. Like, oh, it's okay. They hired UCLA's guy. He's been a DC for 1 year. Look
how much better Nebraska got last year defensively. Did it change the win-loss column a whole lot? Not really. Nope. I mean, the offense is going to regress some for them no matter what, because Miller Moss isn't the number one pick in the draft. So,
yeah. Like, that's it. Like, it's just so interesting to me. I can't wait to see them play this year. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, and if they do, like, this is going to be out there, and I'll come back. People feel free to clip it and make fun of me, but I think they're going to struggle. I think they're going to lose 4 or 5 games, and I think there's going to be games that get beat to crap. All right, let's go here. Neza, Nebraska was a confident program until they met Melvin Gordon.
There's a lot of confident programs. Ask Auburn about that one.
Yeah. It's funny. I shared an elevator with an Auburn defensive back after that bowl game. We were in a conference together in the same hotel, and he was like, that dude was way better than we thought. Yeah. All right, let's pause there. Let's take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about the offensive line recruiting. I know Justin's in on that, and some of the beauty of Coach Blaz, plus defensive line depth. Are there any teams that can actually punish us this year with our defensive line depth? We're going to talk about that coming up next with Justin. But first, a quick break for our friends of the show. Oh, you want to read this one quick? Oh no, this is me. My bad, Justin. I'm still figuring out my stuff here. Let's pause this. A quick break for our friends of the show over at Gametime. Listen, and we talk about a lot. If you want to get tickets to anything you want, go over to Gametime. Baseball's going on right now. This is an excellent time. Go over to Gametime. Find all the tickets to your Brewers action, whatever it is. You get the best tickets, the lowest prices. Pictures of the seats before you sit down. There's a reason it's the fastest growing ticketing platform in the world. You get panoramic views of the seats before you sit down, so you know exactly what it's going to look like to the left, to the right, straight on. Over at Gametime, download the Gametime app today. Use code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets. We already don't know what's going on with strike zones. Don't worry what's going on with your tickets. Take the guesswork out. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. That's Locked On College for $20 off. LOCKEDON for $20 off over at Gametime.
Well, Angel Hernandez retired, so that solved a lot of problems.
I mean, it wasn't recent. Like, yes, that dude was. And for those who don't know who that is, you're probably living a better life because of it.
He's the outlier when it comes to umpiring.
Oh my gosh, Angel Hernandez, man, how that dude stayed employed is beyond.
He got dirt on someone.
Yeah. Let's jump into this. I want to talk offensive line recruiting, Justin. And just more so, are we lining back up to what we were in 2010, 2011? Not that we're going to get to that point because we have offensive lines that had 4 first or second round picks playing at the same time. But is that where our upside is headed?
I think so. I think athletically, that's the type of guys you're looking at. Like, I think you and I have watched a lot of footage of our offensive linemen. I think that we're hitting a kind of a golden age in terms of athleticism that we're seeing. And I just feel like the guys' skill sets that we have coming in are a better fit for us to have some success. Obviously, we had to get guys that were more mobile in general, just given the offensive scheme that we're running. But I just think that athleticism plays. Like, that makes a difference. Like, strength and brute ability, yeah, it helps. But when push comes to shove, you want a little of both. You want somebody who's athletic who also has some strength and can be able to do some things. And I just feel like we're in a much better situation going forward with that overall. And I really like the depth. Like, I think it's been an absolute home run the last 2 cycles.
Can I give you like the analogy that it feels like where we went on offensive line recruiting? Because if you look back at those classes, those groups that built those great offensive lines, not all those were 4-star guys. It was a combination of 3-star guys, some 4-star guys. If you remember Michigan State, right, when they had their great D'Antonio teams, and then they started recruiting 4- and 5-star guys and they fell off, it feels like we got cued on the offensive line. We started recruiting higher pedigree recruits, but players that lack the toughness and the fit. It feels like we've gone back to what
in
we
athleticism.
did.
Doesn't it seem like we were not as athletic offensively as what we were? Like, when we had the 2010 lines, the reason why we went into Ohio State or won that Ohio State game, we were every bit as athletic on the offensive line as they were on the defensive line. Now, they might have been slightly had more burst, but we had the level of athleticism that was on the offensive line. They were bigger guys. They could just withstand it and be able to adjust them, so it didn't matter. Like, you had guys like Zeitler, who we have not had a guard probably since him that's had that level of athletic pedigree. Like, I can't think of anybody. I know people will say Groy, but I just don't think that he had the lateral quickness that somebody like Zeitler had.
Yeah, there's nobody that comes to mind immediately. Groy could run, but
that doesn't really matter for offensive line.
That's kind of all he could really do at an elite level. I tell you, your point is correct. When you look at every offensive line we've gotten, Haywood, you look at Mandel, you look at Corey, you look at Watts, you look at Powell. These guys are all athletes. Oh, Ryan Ramczyk was a
well. So what I want to follow up on that is I'm talking interior offensive line. I would agree with that athletically in terms of a tackle, but yeah, if we're talking interior, we have not recruited the interior offensive line well in terms of athletic fit, and it shows. I think we really struggle when we face elite defensive linemen in terms of being able to stack up athletically, and I think that's about to change with this team. I mean, you have guys like Watts and Mandel that are going to be on the interior. Those guys are going to be capable of taking on high-level athletes from the defensive line and stalemating them, which honestly is what you're trying to do. At the very least, you have to stalemate them because then good things can happen.
Along with Corey, along with Powell. Like, there's just athletes on the interior now. I want to get to this one because this is the next thing I want to transition. Blazek is a perfect fit. I had a comment in here from JB that I wanted to throw up about Blazek. See if I can find it really quickly. I apologize. I actually don't see it anymore. But he said, JB threw it in there on one of the YouTube channels. What I like about Blazek is he went to an offensive line recruit's place and he already had the plan written up. When you read about how Coach Blazek recruits these offensive linemen, he already has a detailed plan of how we're going to use you. This is how you're going to be built. This is the scheme you're here for. Like, you can tell he understands what he wants and he's recruiting to that fit. Whereas, again, previously, it felt like we were just going to like a luxury car store and buying the most expensive thing we could buy, regardless of whether or not it's actually going to work in Camp Randall, in Madison.
I agree with that completely. We've talked about it, along with the cross training and stuff like that. To me, cross training is something you do when somebody has perfected what their current job is. If they're perfect at it, then fine. Now, or if you want to cross train your second team guys, maybe not the end of the world to train them a little bit just for versatility's sake. but I want my starters to be effective at what they do.
Yeah.
And I don't want them being concerned about their footwork playing right tackle because they're a left guard. Like, who cares? Be a really high-level left guard. And we'll worry about that if we have to get it shoved into that situation.
Dude, you and I are so on the same page with this. It used to drive me nuts, all the cross training. It's like if you went to a welding shop, you wouldn't be like, hey, let's take our best welder and also put him on the tires. Like, no, just let him be a great welder. If he's a great left guard, just let him be a great left guard. You don't need to cross train him. Just let him do that. I'm so honest. Listen, this isn't to crush Rudy. Rudy obviously has an acumen. Coaching at Notre Dame, like, recruits really well, but I didn't love all the cross training. Just let me throw this one to you. This is the other one I wanted to get. Next one I wanted to get into from Playmaker. Defense line depth is something I've talked about, something you've talked about, something Rajiv has talked about. He said, for me, the defense line depth will really only be noticed versus Bama or Oregon. I'm not sure any other teams can force the issue. Maybe Iowa, but who knows what their offense is going to do. I'm going to push back on this a little bit. I don't know if you want to take this one first or if you want me to.
I'll take it. I don't think the defensive line is going to be great, but I think they'll be solid. I think linebacker play is going to – listen, if we really take a deep dive into last season, the defensive line wasn't great. It wasn't terrible. Like, what we were struggling with most was filling. Linebackers were not filling where they needed to be in order to close the holes, and that was a problem last year because you and I watched the same film. We'd see linebackers be a step or two slow in reading what was going on, and they didn't close it. And because of that, guys were getting 3-4 yards before they got touched. And that can't happen. It didn't happen in the previous defense, and it covered it up. But so here's my perspective on this a little bit. If guys are more comfortable in the scheme, which I do think they'll take a step naturally through that this year and just be more comfortable in what they're doing and be more like they'll react quicker just because. I think you have a couple of lottery tickets this year in Johnson and Willer that potentially can offer some athletic flexibility there and do some things. And we'll see if a guy like Lane or somebody can provide some ability there. I don't know how comfortable those guys will be in the scheme, but I can tell you this, athletically at the linebacker position, they're going to fill a hell of a lot faster than they were in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you brought up. There's definitely times last year where quarterback, running back, whatever it is, would get around the edge and would be like, defensive line. But in reality, it was the linebacker who couldn't close that space, and they're just not getting to that play. Those plays are going to be gone this year. They're erased with all the players we've talked about, Pius, Lowry, Thomas, another year of Chaney, Allegro, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to make the defense line look better. The spot I'd push back on a little bit with Playmaker's comment, and Playmaker's great. Curtis is awesome. Curtis Holland is awesome. Love his insight. But I think defense line depth matters basically against everybody in the back half of the season.
Right? Yeah, I would agree with that because you cannot afford to have JTJ go down. And
you're just going to lose. You're going to lose somebody. And hopefully you don't lose multiple somebodies. But if you lose a couple guys, listen, Nebraska, that can be a bit of a slog game. And if your defense line depth is down, it's going to matter. I think it's going to matter against Iowa because they're always physical. It's going to matter again.
I want to ask a question on this. Do you think that this is a better group this year than last year?
I do. I'll say this though. Let me ask you this. So I do, but let me ask you this. We picked up two guys in the portal, right? Two guys from a lower level who Hills and Lane who are open, can play a role. We lost two guys to SEC teams that were at least role players last year. It almost feels like if we had picked up Gio Paez and a guy like that guy in the portal, we'd be more excited. It almost feels like we downgraded in those depth spots to some degree. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like if we had picked up a Gio Paez from another
I think we just if honestly, if I was going to seriously tell you, I would say I would feel somewhat like it's a wash. I feel like we probably got Rodis Johnson was a malcontent. There's some things we've kind of heard about that it necessarily wasn't the best situation. Paez, he was solid. I mean, he wasn't a guy that made a lot. Like he wasn't a guy that got in the backfield much. He had weight and he could hold the point a little bit, but I don't think he was particularly had great burst. I don't think he was bad, but I just don't think he was good either. And I think that you're probably getting similar from Lane and Who is the other guy from
Elijah Hills. I think you're
Elijah Hills.
I think you're hoping that you get similar. I'm not even sure if you
I
do.
think you have more twitch with both of them. I just don't know how much they're going to actually, how disruptive they'll actually be. I think the young guys are where you're really hoping that you get some difference and where I think there's a huge chance.
So I actually think Hills is probably a downgrade from Paez or Rodas.
I think Lane is, I would say Lane is the guy because I just don't, Rodas Johnson just wasn't anything last year.
Yeah, I think Lane is the guy I'm more excited about. Hills to me, and this is not. You just look at that stat line and it just causes it creates your eyebrow to go up a little bit that you couldn't be more disruptive.
I don't even know if he's in the rotation yet, to be quite honest. I think Lane will be in the rotation.
I think Lane will be too. Tyler Schreiber says University of Albany guy versus losing Paez to LSU isn't a wash. I kind of agree there. I think that's kind of what I was trying to say. I think he said it a little better than what I was trying to say.
I don't think Elijah Hills is a wash there. I'm saying overall, the two guys coming in and the two guys going out overall are a wash. I think Lane's probably a slight upgrade over Paez in terms of an athlete, but we'll see how he fits this year. Strength and conditioning is going to be a big deal with these guys. We're going to find out how well they can hold up because it's a different ball game. Like Paez or not, he was a guy who had been in a Big Ten weight program for how many years? Mm-hmm. Lane and Hills have not been in that. It's a completely different ball game.
Yeah, that's true. And I'll say this too. Those guys, much like the Tyler Van Dyke conversation, where Van Dyke's going to look better than Mordecai, in my opinion. I think he's a better fit, but he's just going to look better because he has Renfro and he has year 2 of Pauling and Tretch, and he's just going to look better because the pieces around him are better. I think these defense linemen this year are going to look better, to your point, because the linebackers around them are better. It's going to free them up a little bit. So I do agree there. Tyler Strieber, TJ Buller's a sneaky loss given he didn't really play just for depth ?
Short answer, no, because until he's actually proven something on the field, you really can't call him anything.
I do agree with that. I don't see Bullers as a loss. That is a recruiting bust, though, right? A guy who's a 4-star, 3-star guy.
His high school film was incredible. I am still shocked that he did not turn into at least a quality depth piece at the college level. I think he was misused. If you really look at him, I think what you ideally would have liked to see him turn into is an Alec James type defensive end. You would have liked to see him be a pass rush specialist type guy who's maybe a little lighter but has burst and can hopefully put some pressure on tackles.
He feels like a guy who, if he had been recruited by Bielema and played in the Dave Doran defense and he was a 4-3 defensive end, that would have worked for him.
Which is what he was actually mostly thought of. Like, he was not considered to be like he had to make an adjustment. He was a defensive end in high school and had to become a guy who learned to play, on a 2-point stance. So it makes a difference.
Going back to your original question, I do feel better about the defensive line because I love Johnson. Dylan Johnson's going to play this year. I'm pretty confident in that. I wish he had got here early. But
when you hear Brady say that he's got elite twitch, that's all you need to hear. Like, if they can get him to understand his keys and just make the right plays, he'll be on the field simply because he's going to be a difference maker. He's 290 pounds. He gets to 300 or whatever by the end of fall camp. Guys with bursts that can play in the middle at 290, he's probably fine. Like, if he can get on top of an offensive lineman before they're ready, it won't matter because he's strong as a bull, even at 290, that you're going to really struggle with him. And that wrestling background will definitely pay off.
The other thing I'll point out, and I think this gets lost sometimes, and I probably do this too. People say he's a true freshman or he's this. Ultimately, strength is strength. You look at Dylan Johnson's squat numbers, you look at his testing numbers, like he's strong enough.
700 pounds already at squat?
Like, strength is strength. That plays. And he's a 20-year-old true freshman. So he's age maturity-wise, he's a redshirt sophomore, for gosh sake, or a redshirt freshman, for gosh sake. Like, he's going to play, I think, because of that, because I think Neal probably takes a bit of a step, because Ernest Willer probably gives you 10 to 15 snaps a game. Does that feel right? That feels about right to me.
I think so. So one of the things I will say, are you concerned at all about the defensive line being a little undersized this year?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been concerned with that because Jamel Howard, if you told me Jamel Howard, if he got some snaps last year and then you told me, hey, he looked great in spring this year, I think he's in line to play at least in base packages as a big run stuffing nose tackle, I would feel so much better about this defensive line, bro. Like, if I was super confident he could be a first and second down type anchor, it changes everything. But I'm not confident he can be that this year.
I think we're going to have to be far more disruptive in order to make plays, because in the run defensive standpoint, I am a little concerned about guys getting washed out, regardless of how strong Dylan Johnson is. I think you get two guys on you, it's really hard to hold the point when you don't have the weight. And I think that's the bigger deal. Do I think that he's capable of causing problems man on man? Heck yeah. But when you get double teamed and you're a little undersized, I think that there's some question there about how he'll hold up.
I think it's a weakness. Curtis Neal, same thing, right? Like, I think Curtis Neal could have a breakout year, but he's going to be undersized for trying to hold the point.
I think Benton was 305 and 6'4", by the way. So there's a difference there. He's got 2 inches in height and 15 pounds on him. He was 315 the following year. So that tells you how big Benton was by comparison.
That's also the reason, because I don't think Pavy's film, jumping to recruiting, was elite, but he had the body type that you're looking for to be kind of.
He did. He was a fire hydrant, and he had some decent burst. Like, I wouldn't have expected him to be the sack numbers of a Benton, but I do think that he could have gotten the backfield and broken up some runs.
Dennis Reynolds, defense line coach from Air Force, look at the best of them. I do think that is with the coach.
I think it's a good hire.
I agree. Evan Gabriel, just want to throw this out there. A lot of people have been asking, like, just checking in on the move. I appreciate every single person who said, good luck on the move. Welcome to Wisconsin. I'm in a basement right now. I'm still trying to figure out my Wi-Fi. So I appreciate everybody sticking with. But Evan says, how's Shell Lake? So far, it's great. We live on a little road. I've had 4 neighbors stop by, one of which had a key to the house, just turning it in. So that was like, hey, I've had it in the house for a while. You guys should have this now.
And that's when Ryan changed the locks.
So another person was like, hey, I took some pictures of your wife and kid down on the dock. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Oh.
Okay. Roger that. But no, it's been great. I appreciate everybody reaching out. There's a couple people who have done it, and thank you so much. Justin, I want to wrap up with this. Sorry, as a fly buzzes by me. What's the hidden depth spot that worries you the most? We talked defensive line, and not Renfro. We've talked center depth before if he gets hurt. What's the spot on the team you're like, you know what, that one's kind of sneaky scary if somebody goes down?
Oh, man. I don't really have a spot where I don't think there's going to be somebody that's at least solid, which I think is, like, if you lose a tight end this year, you're kind of losing a little bit of the same. Like, I feel there's like 5 guys that are all kind of at the same level right now, but I feel like that about a lot of positions. There are definitely stars that I feel like you downgrade from being above average to being solid, which is like safety. If Hunter Wooler goes down, I think we'll still be solid at the safety positions, but it's a downgrade. If you lose Hallman at corner, it definitely drops a notch. But I still think you can put 2 solid corners out there and feel good about the athletic ability of the guys that are out there and have some experience. Like, are you really concerned about Forkerine and Delancey being out there as your corners? I'm not.
So I think if you lose any star, you're in trouble. Like, that's if you lose Rico, if you lose Wooler, if you lose Renfro, if you lose Pauling, like, any star matters. Some of the answers in the chat to this. Jeffrey says outside linebacker. Tim says tackle depth. Tyler says running back.
I will agree with tackle depth, to be honest. I love Haywood. I think he's got a ton of upside, and I think we're going to see him get snaps this year. But I do not want to be facing Alabama with Haywood as a starter at left tackle like that. And he wouldn't, to be fair. As much as we like him as a player, I will guarantee they will slide somebody out to the tackle spot rather than start Haywood, because I just don't think that you want him out there getting his lunch eaten against elite guys as his first experience. It just doesn't do him any good. Like, he's learning yet.
Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. I think that's probably a better answer than I was going with. Tyler actually had mine. I think this is a tale of 2 parts of the season, though. I think early year running back depth kind of scares me a little bit because Chess is injury prone, and I don't think the young guys are quite ready. I don't think Aker or Yak are different spaces.
You think Atuka could play? I heard he had a good spring.
I love Atuka. I just think early in the year, it's a lot to ask a true freshman to play. And we know Ches is injury prone. I think we've seen Yak and Aker. I don't know. I think
against Alabama, I don't know if any of these guys we're going to feel good about. Like, you can like what we have in the running back room and say none of these guys are dynamic enough unless somehow Jones or Dupree ends up being a dude that's out there in that game. I think the guys are solid, but there's nobody that I can look at and be like, this guy can go give me 100 yards in this game.
I can't wait to watch Tyree Walker, by the way. He's just going to run some people over this year. Not in
He
the
is,
Alabama.
but I don't expect him to go against an Alabama and get 100 yards.
I agree. We're going to wrap it there. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. First show in Wisconsin. We have to go live. Justin, it feels apropos that Justin joins for it as well. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.